Go ahead.
Okay, sounds good. So first of all, thank you everybody for coming today. We're really excited to talk to you about the 5 biggest mistakes when preparing to sell your business. So we're really excited to have everybody here and appreciate you taking the time to do it. So before we get started, I wanted to start with just a few housekeeping notes. So please turn your video on and your mic off for now. Enter your contact information in the chat room, and during the presentation, make sure you're in speaker view, which can be found in the top right corner of your screen. Then turn back to gallery view after the presentation. If you have questions for the speaker, please list them in the chat room. And before you jump off at the end, you can make a copy of the chat room conversation by going into the chat room, clicking on the 3 horizontal dots, and clicking Save Chat. So before we get started, I'd also like to encourage you to take screenshots during this session. Feel free to share them on social media. We're happy to get the word out about the presentation. We are recording today, but we will stop the recording at the Q&A section so that anybody who has specific questions, we'll take that out of the recorded piece. So you won't have to worry about that section. And now without further ado, I'm happy to introduce you to the panel. So as soon as I can move the slide over. So we're going to start today. We are all members of the business advisory sphere of Mastermind Professional Development. Very proud to be working within that organization. And we'll let Jordan take it first here.
Awesome. Thank you. So I am a business attorney. I'm a principal at Offit Kerman in our business and corporations practice group. I help individuals, business owners in all stages of the life cycle of the business. So from day one, choice of entity, all the way through mergers, acquisition, both asset and stock purchases and sales, representing both buyers and sellers, and really everything that comes in between. So here my expertise is going to come to you from the perspective of succession planning, mergers, and acquisitions.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Bola Dina, CEO and Managing Partner at MBA Growth Partners. We provide business advisory and management consulting support for small businesses in all sectors, both the for-profit and nonprofit sectors. We also do some work within the public space as well. With about 18 years of experience in the management consulting field, I specifically focus on go-to-market strategies, strategic planning, business process optimization, and general business advisory support.
Awesome. So I'm Jesse Mail. I'm the owner of Sebastian Lane Consulting. We're an outsourced sales management firm. We work with professional services firms with 10 or less salespeople to help them set up a proven and repeatable sales process.
Hello, everyone. I'm Sonia Durr. I'm the founder and owner of Bridge Performance Coaching, and our main product is Coach Recruiting, which is a combination of strategic staff-based coaching paired with targeted recruiting to ensure finding the best person to give you the overall best performance and best results. And looking forward to talking with you all today.
And Chris, yep. Oh, Annabelle, okay.
Sorry about that. Good afternoon. I'm Annabelle Quintero, and I work with Chris Schaefer at MV Financial. I am focused on the business development side. I've been with the firm for 25 years, 20 of those years as a senior advisor, and now, as I said, focused on business development and helping identify organizations and families that could use our help in the area of asset and wealth management.
Great. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you again for joining us today. As Annabelle said, my name is Chris Schaefer. I'm a CPA by trade and a certified financial planner and am a senior advisor with MB Financial. We are a Bethesda-based wealth management firm. I work with business owners and their families, helping them develop their overall wealth and financial plans, as well as setting up and managing their corporate 401k retirement plans.
Excellent. Perfect. And as with all things, we start with strategy. So we're going to start with Bola. Let me go ahead and get her slide ready and take it away, Bola.
Well, if I could interrupt Bola and get to her quickly, this one will be my slide.
Oh, okay, perfect.
Yeah, no problem. So the the mistakes that we have today for everyone, they're not really in any particular order, except for the fact that I think this first mistake is probably the biggest mistake of all, and that's not having a succession plan at all. A lot of business owners will think about succession when it's time. You know, they're ready to sell. What's the process? What do I need to do? Ideally, they're really going to be thinking about this down the line, maybe 5 years in advance. But even 10 years is not too early to start thinking about these things. So 5 to 10 years, it's not too early to start developing a succession plan and figuring out exactly what the roadmap is to navigate the obstacles between where you are today in your operations and where you need to be to sell the business. So the first step in this process is developing goals. And so here's where I'm going to turn this over to Bola, because Bola is going to tell us a little bit more about goal setting and identifying the goals.
You're on mute, Bola.
All right, sorry about that. Thank you, Jordan. So that's right, not having a goal, not having a plan is unfortunately one of the most frequent or common mistakes small business owners have, particularly as you're getting ready to sell your business. So what is strategic planning? It is the process of establishing and documenting a direction for where you're going. You have a sense for where you are right now. And hopefully you have a sense for where you want to go. And if it is to sell your business in the next 4 or 5 years, there is going to have to be a strategy for how to get there. Most of the time, you will continue to operate your business. So now you need to think about some of the operational efficiencies that you need to put in place. You need to think about how to properly allocate your resources of time, people, technology, the things that you are prioritizing when it comes to various initiatives. So these are all areas that you'll have to assess for, number one, how to get your business operating as excellently as possible, but also so that you can start to position yourself for your succession plan. A lot of times, some organizations do engage in strategic planning. However, they do not fully complete the process. So you pull together your executives, you have a sense for where you want to go, and essentially becomes an exercise that does not become actionable. So if you go to the second slide, we'll see how to create an action plan to prioritize your focus. So if the goal is to sell your business within a specific period of time, now we have to start thinking about the activities that we are completing. Which ones need to be deprioritized? Which ones need to be prioritized? What new activities do we need to put in place? Particularly, once again, as we want to really get our organization ready to sell for the most amount of value. And then how do we need to move resources around? What new talent do we need to gain? Which we'll talk a lot about that later. But ultimately, it is important to have a strategy, but ultimately operationalize that strategy through an action plan so that you can start to march towards your succession plan. And then as you're completing these activities, just make sure that you're tracking the necessary metrics around completion, the values that you're gaining from all these efforts, so that you can be sure that you're spending your resources wisely. All right.
Fantastic. Thank you, Bola. Wow, that was such a great point about emphasizing the importance of having a strategic plan for your business. I would argue, though, however, that it's just as important to have a strategic plan for your financial and retirement life. A key part of planning for your future is understanding where you are today. For anyone in the webinar in the manufacturing or retail business, you would know this as taking inventory. So that's the first step we got to do, understanding what your current financial situation is. What money do I have in a bank? What money do I have in my investments? What money do I have saved for retirement? What money do I owe? Do I have a mortgage? Do I have any personal loans, car loans, anything like that? Getting a sense of where you are today is going to be the most important step of where you're going to go in the future. Because again, if you don't know where you are now, it's impossible to know where you're going to be going forward. The second part of that then is going to be actually doing a retirement planning analysis. So it's depending where you are in your retirement goals. Is it 3 years out, 10 years out, 15 years out? It's really a matter of painting that picture of where my life's going to be. Am I going to travel the world? Am I going to be a stay-at-home and do whatever my hobby is? Am I going to have a second home at the lake or at the beach, whatever it may be? really getting your hands around what that lifestyle looks like is going to be ultimately important. And the second part of that then is going to be actually trying to the best of our ability is understand what that cost. Do I need $100,000 a year, $150,000 a year, whatever that is? And then ultimately, what kind of overall asset pool do I need to make sure that I've got the money to provide the lifestyle that I want to have? That's going to help you determine what sort of gap, if there is a gap that you may have. And again, for most of us, unless we are already retired, there's going to be some sort of gap. What that gap helps you though is determine what your net sale proceeds are. So again, I've got a 401k, I've got some savings, for example. I want a certain lifestyle in the future. My business probably is my biggest asset. So what value do I need to get out of the business in order to make sure that I'm sustaining my retirement goals? And again, that analysis is going to help you determine what that is. So once I know what my gap is, then I've got to go and find out what is my business actually worth. And again, the closer you are to that selling of the business, the more detailed analysis you need to do. Again, if you're a year, 2 years, 3 years away, you're going to want to go out and get a full valuation of what the business is going to be so you actually have a determination. If you're 5, 10 years away, again, you can do maybe more of what I would say is an informal valuation just to get kind of a global sense of where it's going to be. And ultimately what you're going to do then is determine what your gap is and whether that business is going to be able to fulfill that gap. So let's walk through a case study of 2 recent business owners I worked with and how their goals were different, but ultimately the same in many ways. So they both had roughly $500,000 in their 401k retirement plan, had $500,000 in their bank or personal investments, whatever it may be. And their goal was to retire in roughly 5 to 6 years. And they determined based on that retirement planning analysis that they needed somewhere between $5 and $7 million in net worth in order to live the life that they want to do. Well, in scenario number 1, the business owner did the retirement plan analysis, understood where they were, and ultimately determined that their business was currently valued at $1 million. Well, they've got $1 million in the bank already. Their business is worth $1 million, but they ultimately need $5 or $6 million in the road. Their goal now is going to be to build the value of that business. How do we turn this $1 million valued business into a $3, $4, $5 million valued business? In scenario number 2, though, their business was valued at $4 million. So again, they've got $1 million in the bank. Their business is worth $4 million. Their goal is $5 million. They've already done that. They've achieved their goal. So that their goal changes slightly to be not necessarily building value of the business, which again, every business owner wants to do that anyway, but how do I retain the value in that business? So depending on which scenario you are in will help shape your strategic plan. So the ultimate question that needs to be answering is, do you need to build the value of your business or retain the value of your business? So let me turn it over to Jordan, who's going to talk about why having an actual succession plan is so important.
Thank you, Chris. And, you know, retirement is just one example of what you're preparing for in a succession plan. And some of the other things you need to prepare for: death, disability, bankruptcy, voluntary withdrawal, involuntary withdrawal. Voluntary withdrawal being, you know, quitting. If someone wants to get out, what does that process look like? An involuntary withdrawal sometimes is a little bit scary to business owners, but I normally encourage my clients to have a clause in their operative agreement for involuntary withdrawal, specifically for cause. So, for example, if you find that the other owner is embezzling money, you know, what mechanism do you have to remove that owner? Particularly, what if that owner is 70% and you're the 30% owner, but 70% is embezzling money? You know, an involuntary withdrawal provision will give you the rules to remove that individual. So the other part I want to talk about here is, you know, whether it's a succession plan is different whether it is a single owner entity or whether it is a multi-owner entity. For a single owner entity, it could be as simple as updating your estate plan, but of course it may not be that simple. I'm working with a client, or I was working with a client very recently whose family did not want to go into the business. And what we did is we put together a plan where the key employee purchased insurance on the life of the owner. And that way, in the event of the owner's death, the key employee had the funds to be able to afford to buy out that owner and to pay the owner's estate. It's really a win-win for all. When you're talking about multiple member entities, multi-owner entities, you really should have an operating or stockholders agreement. This is going to be the operative agreement that controls the default rules for what happens and how you succeed in the event a triggering event occurs. Typically the buy-sell portion is just one portion of the shareholder or operating agreement. And what we do is we create default rules. So if someone were to die, if someone were to become disabled, if someone is ready for retirement, how do you notify the company? How do you value that person's interests in the company? And how do you effectuate that buyout? Perhaps there's an option for the company, a right of first refusal, in other words. Perhaps it goes to the other owners. And then lastly, how do you actually afford that purchase? And so there's two ways to do that. One way is the company just allows payment over time. And the other way is to fund it through insurance. And so let me kick it back to Chris, if you can explain how the insurance funding works on a buy-sell quickly for me, please.
Yeah, thank you, Jordan. Wow, I think you did a great job of laying out the importance of having a succession plan, because that's exactly right. As much as we all want to think that we're immortal and we're going to live forever, things happen in life and you got to make sure you're taken care of there. So I've worked with, I'm sure all of us on the panel have worked with many business owners who say they have their succession plan in place and that they are taken care of. They've hired an attorney who's drafted up some great documents and put in a great plan. I'd then like to turn them and say, that's fantastic. You're already ahead of 75% of the business owners that I talk to. But let me ask you this. How are you going to fund the buyout if needed? 9 out of 10 times I get a blank stare. But let's first talk about the two ways to set up that buyout. So as Jordan mentioned, basically you have either most likely a multiple owner type arrangement. So you have what's called a cross purchase or an entity purchase. In a cross purchase, effectively what you're doing is I am buying out partner B directly. So partner B passes away, partner B has a disability, or maybe one of those involuntary withdrawals that Jordan mentioned, I'm going to buy out him directly. Me buying out my partner.
Are we losing him? Can anyone hear him?
We lost you momentarily there, Chris.
I can hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Now we can, yep.
Okay. I don't know where I cut off, so sorry about that.
When you started with the entity purchase.
Oh, the entity purchase. So again, that's a matter of where then the business is actually buying out the partner rather than you doing it themselves. So again, what I was saying is, again, I work with some great people in my firm, and I'm sure the business owners that are on the webinar today work with some great people, and you probably love their families, you love their spouse, but ultimately you're in the business with your partner for a reason and not their spouse. So the importance of that is then how am I actually going to fund that buyout when it happens? I can self-fund it, of course. Well, if I had $5 million in my pocket, then again, you probably don't need to be on this call because you got the money set aside anyway. The best way to do it is through insurance funding. So whether it's a life insurance, disability insurance, basically saying I'm passing that risk on to another entity. They're going to provide the funding to me at a minimal cost to myself in order to make sure that I'm buying out the partner or partners, whatever it may be. So that, again, I retain control of that business. The second aspect of that is going to be, again, protecting your key employees. Again, most business owners are wearing multiple hats. We know that one. But are you wearing all the hats? Maybe you have a key employee who heads up your sales department or is heading up operations or is actually the product expert on your team. Again, having some protection on that key employee is important so that if something happens to them, again, it's heaven forbid it ever happens and hopefully never does. But again, having the funding in place to replace that person from a financial standpoint is going to be ultimately important. So again, let me turn it back over to Jordan to talk about the next big mistake that we see.
Thank you very much, Chris. So the next biggest mistake is the failure to identify the proper target successor. So the business owner here, they need to understand who his or her best or most likely successor is. If you fail to identify the proper target, you're going to lead yourself down the wrong path. And just by way of example, if your ideal exit is to a third party, you shouldn't be using mechanisms to incentivize key employees that wind up giving the key employee, a few percentage points of the company, because the buyer, it's going to be less attractive to the buyer. And so again, identify your target successor. If it's a third party, there are things that you should or shouldn't do to attract that third-party buyer. On the other hand, perhaps your target successor is a key employee. If that's the case, you need to have conversations with your employees to make sure that you're on the same page and to make sure that your interests here are aligned. And if they're not aligned, you need to pivot. I represent an individual who was a key employee of a company for 20 years and very suddenly was terminated. And when that key employee was terminated, they were terminated to make way for a third-party buyer. But what the owner of the company didn't anticipate was the loyalty of the customers and the loyalty of the employees to the terminated employee. And so customers left, employees left, and it wasn't good for the owner of the company. It wasn't good for my client who was terminated. And frankly, it wasn't good for the buyer. So you need to understand who your target successor is. Otherwise, you're likely to approach the succession plan incorrectly. Next slide for me, please, Jesse. Number 3, failing to separate the owner from the business. So, you know, if I had everyone raise their hands here today of the business owners on this call, now how many people are operations, sales, bookkeeping, accounting, marketing? You know, it's a lot of people. It's a lot of the business owners that we all know. And the problem is that if you are the business, it's not saleable. No buyer is going to be interested in purchasing a business that can't survive without you. And so what you need to do is you need to identify ways to create value separate and apart from you as the owner. So let me turn this over to Sonia, if you could, please. You know, how do we do that?
Thanks, Jordan. Yeah, you teed that up perfectly. So the first mistake I want to talk about today is the failure to consider key staff and how to develop them appropriately as you prepare for succession planning. So the mistake, as Jordan was highlighting, is to avoid micromanaging and keeping control of everything rather than training and delegating and appropriating key staff. So what we're looking at here is really a leadership versus a management mindset. I'm sure many of you are familiar with the bestseller by Jim Collins called Good to Great. And in that book, the results of his research showed that good businesses are typically led by managers, where those businesses that make it to the great status are led by leaders. And the differentiator there really is that leaders are focused upon working themselves out of a job, which means they are empowering others to take the business to the next level, and they're identifying and training key staff in order to do that as they plan for succession. Thanks, Jesse. And so that leads us into talking about making sure that you're not forgetting about creating a healthy culture. I'm going to be talking about this a lot more in 2 weeks when we have our part 2. So I'm just going to highlight a couple of things here today. But very important for business owners to pay attention to culture. It's so much more than a buzzword in the business community. It really defines everything that you are and are not as a business. So key components of a healthy culture, obviously vision and mission, talk about those a little bit more in 2 weeks. But I want to focus in on today core values, because core values are those things that you identify, that you say, this is what my business is, and this is what it's not. It should be guiding and dictating all of your hiring and firing decisions. Can't tell you how many business owners I talk to who maybe they've thought about their core values, but they haven't clearly, identified exactly what they are, or even if they have, that they haven't communicated them to their staff or reminded their staff of them. And again, it's really what shapes your business. So very important not to ignore that. And that really leads us into making sure that you're not forgetting about taking a look at the strengths that you have on your current team. Know who you have there and also the diversity of the strengths that you have represented on your team, so that you're making sure to pay attention to performance gaps. And this needs to be done on a fairly regular basis. So those that are forgetting to do regular evaluations and check-ins, that can be an issue as well. And alluded to a little bit earlier, Jim Collins, he's famous for right people in the right seats. This is just a different version of that, making sure that you're paying attention to, with that strengths identification and diversification, do you have the best people in the right seats within your organization to support your organizational structure? And so when we talk about organizational structure and succession planning, looking at where you are today and then knowing where you want your organizational structure to be at the time that you're planning to sell your business. And then the next thing I'd like to talk to you about is just a mindfulness about being resistant to change. And so here the mistake is really failing to consider how different staff members, especially those key staff members on your team, will respond to change. Studies actually show that nearly 75% of the population is considered adverse to change, especially change that they haven't planned or that they didn't know about in advance. So failing to think about this in your succession planning process is definitely an issue, because of the fact that our staff members, our employees as business owners are our greatest resource, our greatest asset. Failing to take into consideration their anticipated response to how things will change and pivot with succession planning is probably not going to go well in the end for you. So again, back to that strengths identification, knowing your staff is really crucial when determining how and when to start the preparation process for timely communication. And that leads us into our next thing we want to avoid, and that is the lack of communication. And this can really look two ways when you're thinking about succession planning. It can be poor timing of that communication, or it can be lack of communication altogether. Because of the fact that communication is based upon trust, we want to make sure that we're being very mindful of when and how we communicate things to our staff. I just want to share a really quick story. I was working with longtime business owners who actually had a pretty solid succession plan in place. They had identified and prepared a key staff member who was going to take a much larger role in management, but their business ended up selling quicker than what they had anticipated, and they neglected, for whatever reason, in all of the chaos going on with the sale of the business, to actually communicate about the sale of the business to this key employee before they announced it to the whole team. And she really took that as a betrayal of trust and ended up leaving, which then caused a mass exodus from some of the rest of the team, and it left that new business owner really in a bad position. So again, just really considering that timeliness and method for communication, especially to your key staff. And that leads us to my last point, and that would be, again, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. I'll talk about this a little bit more in 2 weeks, but a failure to seek input. In the succession planning process from beginning to end, I mean, a lot of us on this call today are talking about different aspects of the succession planning process. Seek input, get some advice as you're putting together your plan. And definitely come back in 2 weeks where we'll talk about some suggestions on how to best communicate this to your staff. And so I'm going to hand it back to Chris.
Great. Thank you, Sonia. As Sonia so elegantly put it, your employees are going to be the key to your culture. I'm going to spend a few minutes talking about ways to create a great employee experience in order to appropriately retain and recruit your key employees. Why is this important? Well, it'd be great if the sale of your business was an all-cash deal where the buyer wrote you a very, very large check and you got to walk away from. Well, that very, very rarely happens. At a minimum, there's going to be some sort of earnout period, probably some sort of installment payments, where you're going to need your key team to help continue to drive revenue and profits for the new buyer in order to make sure you're getting the revenue that you have. And one of the best ways to do that is to create a top quality benefits program. 10 years ago, 15 years ago, just having some sort of benefit program, especially a retirement plan, was good enough. Well, your key employees are asking better and smarter questions, and just having one isn't good enough anymore. When they're looking at a retirement plan, for example, it's not just about the fees and investment options. It's about things like plan design. So if I'm hiring a new employee, how quickly am I able to participate in not only my own contributions to the plan, but also the employer contribution? Is it immediate? Is it 3 months? Or is it a year down the road? What does that employer contribution look like? Again, smart employees are not just looking at their take-home pay, they're looking at their true benefit package overall. So not just all cash, but what other benefits am I getting from the organization? So what does that match or that contribution look like from the employer? And more importantly, as we see every single day, there's so much information out there. There's so much bad information out there. How do I take advantage of these benefit plans and make it work for me and my family? So having an individual education, individual advice as part of that retirement plan is going to be absolutely crucial. Just providing information and providing investment options is not good enough anymore. How do I take that information? How do I distill it and make it work for my family is most important. What about designing some executive compensation plans, whether it's deferred compensation, stock options, phantom stock, all these other various strategies where now you're saying, employees, you are important to me and my business. I want you to grow as I grow. Here's some incentive to help you grow the business for me. Now, it may not be a direct stock where they actually take ownership, but again, through deferred compensation, phantom stock, other programs like that one, it's now saying, again, key employees, you're valuable to me, you're important to me, I want you, I trust you, I need you, help me grow the business so that you benefit as much as I do. And again, a lot of the stuff I've just been talking about here is going to be more about kind of cash or physical type of benefits, but there's going to be other things outside of salary and bonus. What about employee benefits? Now in this COVID environment, in the quarantine environment we're in, working at home, commuting, flexible work hours. Again, I'm sure a lot of us have families and maybe young kids, and how do I find that work-life balance? So again, when you're looking at developing that great employee experience, certainly yes, a paycheck is going to matter. But what else can you do to provide a great benefit experience so that things that the employee may not be able to see tangibly, but ultimately makes their experience working for you is going to be significantly better? That's what's going to be ultimately most important about creating that culture that you want to have, so that ultimately when you do turn around and sell that business, your employees are excited, they love what you're doing, and ultimately they're going to stay through that transition to make sure that the buyer is going to maintain the profits and sales that they're paying you for. So this is a great place for me to turn over to Jesse, who's going to talk about ways to teach your key employees how to be autonomous and generate revenue without you.
Yeah, so you're exactly right, Chris. So, the value, one thing Sonia said that really, resonates is, you're working to put yourself out of a job. Like, you're working to get yourself out of the position where you're the person where everything flows through and everything is responsible when you're trying to sell your business, right? So, replacing the rainmaker is a real hard thing to do. And it's a very big problem for especially smaller businesses. So if you can't prove that the company can make money without you as the owner, then you're not going to maximize your sale price and value, and you're not going to minimize your time that you have to stay in the business to transition. So how do you prove that your business can sell without the owner's institutional knowledge and network? You must utilize a proven and repeatable sales process. And it goes hand in hand with what Chris was talking about your employees creating an employee experience where they want to stay, they want to drive revenue, they want to be part of the company, while you're building the business and also when you leave. Keys to a proven and repeatable sales process are they prove success independent of current ownership. So the buyer gets confidence that, okay, this can move on successfully. I can make money after I buy this, which obviously brings on a larger payday for you, the owner. It's attractive to potential buyers, right? Because they can say, okay, if I don't feel like I have the acumen to build out a sales program, well, there's already one here and I know it's working and I've seen the results and it's played out in front of me, right? The third thing it does is it widens the net, right? So now you not only can somebody who finds value in kind of the structure that you have, not only can they come in and say, I'm going to replace your system, but it does allow in those business owners who are like, hey, this is something that I'm not confident in. So when you have the sales process, it gives them the choice, which widens the net, right? And then the fourth key is to make sure it is documented, because what you're going to find and what sellers are afraid of is that process, if it's not documented, it may have a ton of institutional knowledge built into it that nobody realizes, because everybody who looks at that sales process and works on that sales process is within the institution, right? So we're going to move on here to mistake number 4 with BOLA.
Thanks, Jesse. Mistake number 4 can really be summarized by saying just leaving money on the table by not streamlining and automating your business operations. When a buyer is looking to buy your business, as much as possible, they're looking for a turnkey operation. We've talked quite a bit about, making sure that your employees are geared and ready to go and be of value to the buyer, but also ensuring that your business can operate without you. But now, of course, as we think about a post-COVID world, business owners really have their work cut out for them when it comes to really advancing the state of their business operations to make sure that the assets that they've worked so hard for can really derive the best value in the marketplace. So when we talk about business operations, there are several ways that you can look at doing such. And the first thing is to really develop a culture of innovation within your organization. When buyers are thinking about your business, they want to make sure that there's a team of folks who can really solve problems, not necessarily stick to how things have always been done. A buyer is going to look at ways to create efficiencies, really squeeze more value out of your business. And if you do not already have that culture of innovation, there will be a discount that will be assigned to your business, because now the buyer will have to go through the process of training on that, or perhaps even swapping out your employees for ones that can really hit the ground running. So it's important for you to think about your industry. What are the best practices? What are the best ways for you all to really be innovating and solving problems and taking your solutions to your to the marketplace and to the clients in as efficient a manner as possible. Of course, the next one is to modernize. It's no surprise that we're all having to do that now, even in our businesses, as we're not necessarily getting ready to sell. But it's important to think about, particularly for older businesses who've been in operations for 20 years, the culture of just stagnant cultures, old systems, old processes, old contracts, things that are not really serving as much value as needed, particularly, once again, just given the changing business environment. These are all things that you'll have to take a look at to make sure that you can squeeze additional value out of your business. There's a need for standardization prior to COVID, and unfortunately, most businesses just tend to do things in a manual, disparate ways. They have disparate systems that are not necessarily pulling data in a consistent manner, disparate processes. Sally has been there for 20 years and Sally has her way of doing things, but it's not the recommended way. But we haven't really had that conversation with her in terms of, standardizing our approach to business. So there's an opportunity here to really train your staff, put processes in place, automate where possible, so that you can standardize and have a repeatable, consistent business process, because these are part of the values that you'll be able to tout to a potential buyer. Transform, similar to innovation, transform the various aspects of your business, clean up your books, clean up the various lingering activities that are not adding value to you. Look for ways to prioritize and put initiatives in place through your succession planning process to really make sure that you're transforming your organization so that it can be ready to derive the right value and the best value in the marketplace. By doing all of this, you will be able to optimize your operations. It's important to reduce non-business related expenses. There's some bad habits that some business owners have, charging the company corporate card for various things, or even cultures that are not additive to your organization from a personnel perspective. So think about things that can be squeezed out so that you can once again optimize the best value for your organization. Ultimately, the more documents when it comes to your processes, procedures, standard operating practices, the more of those that you have in place, which can then become a guidebook for the new buyer from day one, the better positioned you are as a business owner who's looking to sell your business. So really think about the processes, document, which will also allow for you to really cut out the waste. And then lastly, systemize and automate. As you've gone through this whole process, think about ways to really leverage systems. It's very, very easy nowadays to leverage new technologies, new applications. Doesn't really take a lot of investment to tap into cloud opportunities for new systems. So really take advantage of those so that once again, when a new buyer is coming to really assess whether or not this is the right business for them, you simply make it easy for them to make that decision. So with that, I will turn it over to Jordan, I believe is next.
Yes, thank you, Bola. Bola, you said document. That's the title of the autobiography I'm working on. Gotta have everything documented. So it's true, and you should document all of your processes. But I want to talk to you all specifically about documenting the contract. So, contracts, you may have something written down that you haven't. First of all, you may not have had an attorney prepare it to begin with. You may have found it on the internet or who knows. But it's important that you update and review these contracts periodically, because there's several things that can impact you when it comes to succession planning. One thing is changes in the law. And this is particularly true with respect to highly regulated fields. So I can't tell you all how many times I've represented a contractor, specifically home improvement contractors, and their contracts do not comply with the regulations set forth by both the state of Maryland, Virginia, or the District of Columbia, and corresponding local jurisdictions. Montgomery County has its own regulations that apply to home improvement contractors. So if I'm representing a seller of a home improvement contract business and their contracts are not compliant with the law, we could have problems. If I represent the buyer of that home improvement contractor, I'm going to advise them to try and negotiate a discount on the purchase price, because we now have all of this extra liability that exists because the contracts don't comply with the law. One of the other issues is assignability. So if you go back and you look at your contracts, a lot of them may say this contract is not assignable without the prior written consent of both parties, something like that. Well, let's say you have hundreds of contracts and you have this covenant that says that it's not assignable without the consent of both parties. You now need to go out and get the written consent of every single person that's a party to that contract with you. If it's silent, that's a whole other issue. But particularly where it requires the written consent, this could be a big problem when it comes to succession planning. I am representing a client right now who's purchasing a business that has hundreds of contracts. I'm talking 800, 900 contracts. It's silent about assignability, and it's sort of ambiguous as to whether or not they may need to get consent of all of these parties. And we ended up restructuring the deal to avoid this issue. But part of the process we were negotiating, again, was a discount to the purchase price because of the fact that the contracts did not permit assignability and we could have future liability. So really important, that you go back, you look at your contracts, and you see if there's anything that needs to be done today in anticipation of a future sale that can help you. So that's what I've got. Jesse, let me turn this back to you to lead us in the next steps.
Absolutely. So the next section here, Laura, if you could stop recording, because we're going to head to our Q&A